We begin with breaking news out of Germany. At least 9 people are dead after a shooting rampage Friday at a shopping center in Munich. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. At least 9 people have been killed in a shooting spree that broke out at a McDonald's restaurant Friday in Munich, in Germany. The police spokesperson says, quote, "The shooting looks like a terror attack. It comes over a week after another terror attack that was in Nice in France that killed more than 80 people. For the very latest on this attack, we begin now with CCTV correspondent Ira Spitzer in Berlin. And Ira, what are you learning about this attack right now?
Well, as you mentioned, the death toll, according to the Munich police, is 9. They have also said that there are at least 10 injured in the attack. And in terms of the latest information, there is a possibility that one of those 9 people that are dead could be the shooter or one of the shooters. Police have not confirmed that yet, but they say there is a possibility that a body that was found about 1 kilometer from the shooting site could be the body of a shooter, and they are, according to German media reports, investigating that with robots designed to see if there might be any explosive device. So, from the last information that the police have revealed, they did say that there could be up to 3 shooters still at large. Now, one of those could, of course, be the shooter that may have been killed, and we don't know definitely that there are 2 other shooters. Those are based on witness reports. So police following all the leads that they have and obviously taking every precaution, and in doing so they've essentially shut down the city of Munich, told people not to go outside, closed down the subway system, evacuated the main train station. So they are treating this right now as an active crime scene, an active shooter situation, but we don't know if there's still people at large.
And is there a manhunt going on if there are 2 other shooters involved?
Well, they are exploring that option. Yes, there is a massive manhunt in Munich. They're acting on witness reports of seeing multiple people and hearing shots from different angles. So. But the only thing that we know for sure is that there was at least 1 shooter. We don't definitely know there were 2 other shooters, but police not ruling that out. And again, that is why they have established this very tight security situation in Munich at the moment. For the German government's part, the interior minister was actually had just touched down in New York, and he turned his plane around and is on the way to Munich right now to assess the situation in more detail tomorrow morning. There'll be an emergency cabinet meeting here in Berlin to assess the facts as we know them, and to look at any next steps. There's no motive that's even been speculated by the government. In fact, they've encouraged people not to speculate. Of course, online there's been waves of speculation, but there is no known motive right now for these attacks.
Okay, thanks, Ira. That's Ira Spitzer talking to us from Berlin. Let's go now to CCTV correspondent Kevin Osbeck. He's in Brussels. He recently covered the attack in Nice, where more than 80 people were killed. And Kevin, we've had attacks in France, attacks in Belgium, and now another attack in Germany. Attacks that are being blamed on radicalized youth. What efforts are being made on a Europe-wide basis to counter this growing threat, this wave of terror?
Well, really, security has been high here in Europe since the Paris attacks in November of last year, and then it was heightened even more back in March after the Brussels attacks. And then just recently, when you think about it, in the past 8 days here in Europe, there have now been 3 terror attacks. Of course, we don't know the motive behind the current situation in Munich. We don't know if this was an ISIL attack or an ISIL-inspired attack, or if this is a domestic terror attack or someone who just had some sort of mental illness. But nonetheless, Europe has become a continent that really, there's a growing culture of fear here. And there's a lot of fear that a new era is beginning in Europe, where these attacks are just going to become more frequent. In fact, there's been warnings from both the EU as well as the United Nations in the past few weeks that as ISIL loses territory in both Syria as well as in Iraq. There could be about 2,000 foreign fighters who fled Europe to fight and train under ISIL, that they could now be pushed out of the Middle East and returning to their home soil and could be plotting new attacks. So European counterterrorism analysts and counterterrorism officials say this is a continent facing threats from multiple different aspects here. But of course, the main one on everyone's mind is the threat from ISIL.
Europe now has a European counterterrorism center. That is something that was created very recently in the wake of these attacks. How does it work?
Well, the main emphasis on that is sharing intelligence, and that really has been a huge push ever since the Paris attacks. There was a lot of criticism thrown at both the Belgian as well as the French governments for not sharing intelligence with one another. Well, certainly the culture within the intelligence community here in Europe has been changing and changed quite dramatically after the Paris attacks. There's been a lot of pressure from the public for the various intelligence agencies to work closely together, to work much more closely together. And EU counterterrorism officials, including the very top job there, the EU counterterrorism coordinator, says he has seen such a dramatic improvement in intelligence sharing. But then you have the attacks like the one in Nice, where Mohamed Bouel, the man behind that attack, was not known to French counterterrorism analysts. Obviously, it looks like whoever is behind the attacks in Munich likely was not on the radar of German officials, or else the attack probably wouldn't have been as successful as it is right now. So also you have the issue here where there are certain people who are under the radar who don't on the surface pose a threat. They don't leave any sort of digital footprint that intelligence agents can pick up on, and it's impossible to thwart every single attack. So it's a very tough task that has been placed in the hands of agents here in Europe.
Thanks, Kevin. That's CCTV's Kevin Osbeck reporting from Brussels. Now for more, joining me here in the studio is Rolz Bollmann. He is a correspondent for the German media network ARD, and he is Deputy Bureau Chief for ARD Radio in Washington, D.C. He's also from Munich and has been talking with his family there since the shooting attack took place a few hours ago. Also here with us is Ansgar Graf. He is a senior political correspondent for Die Welt. Also with us is Rebecca Zimmerman. She is an associate policy analyst at the RAND Corporation. And from Paris, we're joined by Joav Toker. He is a professor of international relations with the American Graduate School in Paris. Thanks to all of you. Rolz, let me start with you. As I've just said, you are from Munich. You know this area. You've been talking with family. What have you been hearing there?
Well, this has been one that hit really close to home for me. I lived very close by before I moved to the States 4 years ago. I've been to this McDonald's restaurant where it all started. I've been to the Olympia Einkaufszentrum where it all happened dozens of times with my family, with my wife. Thank God family is okay. They've been out of town. I've just talked to my brother-in-law that was the only one who was with his family in downtown Munich. He has been told over the radio to stay at home, to not go out. It was 11 p.m. local time when I last talked to him, and they were just saying, let's go to bed because there's not much you can do.
Now, the people who are in the city center right now, are they able to get home?
They can get home, but the police asked them to go home fast and to not linger on the streets.
Right. Ansgar Graf, this is not the first attack in Germany. Of course, there was an attack just a few days ago on a train in Würzburg, which is in the same state, isn't it, in Bavaria?
Yes, maybe 150 miles away from Munich. In this case, it had an Islamic background. We don't know exactly whether we have this background in this case, but in this case on Monday in Würzburg, there was a young man who claimed to be from Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the investigators think he was not from Afghanistan, but from Pakistan. He injured 4 or 5 people randomly in a train with an axe and with a knife. Fortunately, he couldn't kill anybody, and in the end, he was killed by police when he attacked a law enforcement officer.
What?
And there was a background since he uploaded a pledge to ISIS online.
Now, 2 attacks in just a few days. Why, Ansgar, do you think that Germany is being targeted in this way?
Hard to say. We know that ISIS is against Western states, and especially Western states who are in any form of coalition, for example, in NATO and with the United States, in Afghanistan and so on. But the other thing, we have a big refugee stream to Europe, and we know, we have learned it in Brussels, we have learned it after Paris, the second Paris attack, that some of those perpetrators sneaked in, hidden terrorists who sneaked into Germany and to Europe since the border security didn't work, since there came so many people at the same time, and therefore we have to say in regard to security, Europe states, and especially Germany, doesn't know who is in Germany right now, and same goes for Belgium, same goes for France, and I think that's a big security problem.
Right. Rebecca, our reporter out of Berlin, he alluded to the fact that ISIL could be involved, and we should say at the outset that we don't know who's involved at this stage. Very little information coming through. But if that is the case, and the pattern seems to show us that that could be the case, is this ISIL making its voice heard in Europe? You know, it may be taking battlefield losses in Iraq, but it's saying we're still effective, we're here, and we can still carry out these attacks.
So again, of course, there's a lot that we don't know.
Right.
You know, it's also been said that this is an anniversary, a 5-year anniversy of Anders Breivik's attack in Norway, so it could possibly be related to that. We just don't know. If it is in fact ISIL related, and if it turns out that it's a multiple attacker scenario, something that even perhaps looks maybe like the Nairobi shopping mall attack, but maybe not as thoroughly executed, then I think we have to look at this as being something that's more linked to ISIL core in Syria and Iraq. So for example, so the case earlier in the week, the young boy with the axe on the train, that's more the lone wolf type of attack. If this turns out to be multiple shooters in a coordinated fashion, it's probably more linked to ISIL core. And there is a theory that as they lose ground in Iraq and Syria, they'll be more likely to make their presence felt in some of these sort of soft underbelly of Europe targets.
And if there are lone wolf attacks, or even if it's a very small group, maybe involving a cell of, 2 or 3 people, it becomes very difficult to detect.
Yes, and the cells of 2 or 3 people, it's never just 2 or 3 people. There's always a facilitation network that's helping them to get supplies, and that is dealing with some of the communication back in the direction. There will be an imprint there. If it's a lone wolf attack, it really is a matter of searching the phone and trying to find, as in the case of the Nice attacker, text messages linking them to remote people who helped with facilitation and radicalization. And it's virtually impossible to find all of those.
Okay, let's bring in Joav Toka. He's in Paris. And Joav, you know, if we look at the attacks in Paris, are the people who carried out these attacks ideologically driven, or perhaps inspired by some radical interpretation of their religion? Because in France, we've noticed that a number of these attackers actually have criminal backgrounds.
That's true. That's true in France, that's true elsewhere. There are so many things to say about, indeed, the nature of the linkage between so-called religious beliefs or theological aspects and the acts which we have seen on the terrain. It's much more complicated than that. We've seen, and a lot of things have been said over the last 2 years or so regarding the radicalization phenomena and the multiple reasons for that. So we should be, of course, extremely, that will be the 7th or 8th time we're saying on the show that we should be extremely cautious as we attribute what is happening right now in Munich and is not solved. It's far from being solved either operationally or in terms of us understanding what the facts and the circumstances are. But my take would be that whatever the facts, the concrete operational facts in Munich are, and whatever the circumstances are, that in a way, through a different kind, a larger prism, it doesn't make a lot of difference. Because what we see is that we have a major metropolitan European city, Munich, with almost 2 million inhabitants, in sort of an extreme, awkward, strange situation in which the population is asked to stay at home or to make sure it doesn't go out. The public transportation is out. Now, whether we are going to, indeed ISIL could be, or ISIL driving motivation could be involved here, or whether it be rather linked to mentally disturbed individuals, or whether it has some connection to extreme right movement in Germany, it doesn't make any difference, because the overall context makes the situation as serious as it is, and in this terms, the fallout are in a way are not distinguished by the fact that we're speaking about radical Islam motivation.
Okay, we are going to have to take a break right now. Lots more to talk about this attack in Germany. We'll be back right after that. You're watching The Heat. Welcome back. We're talking about the shooting attack in Munich in Germany, which has left at least 9 people dead. Let's get back to our panel. And Rolf, what exactly would be going on in Germany now as far as going after these attackers are concerned? There's a federal police force in Germany.
Yes.
Would they be involved in this?
They would be involved. They are very much involved. Actually, we have one crack unit, the GSG-9. It's a counterterrorism unit from the federal police. They have been brought in just hours after the attacks happened. And they are coordinating with the local police and the state police as well. They're all working together.
What kind of cooperation is there between a federal force and a local police force in Germany? Because in some countries, you know, there is kind of a turf war going on.
Well, they do have curfews, and I want to make sure that everybody has got its own stake. But in a situation like that, I'm pretty confident that they are cooperating.
Ansgar, you mentioned earlier on that there is this widespread perception that there are a lot of terrorists who infiltrate into Europe from Syria. You know, they come as part of refugees. The Europol, the European Law Enforcement Agency, plays down on that. They say they haven't found much evidence that that is the case. Yet, I mean, that persists. There is a belief that that does happen. Could we see Germany cut back on the number of refugees it takes because of that? Because public opinion would say, we don't want to take that many refugees if they pose a danger to us.
Oh, I think this process started already a month ago. In March, we had this agreement between European Union and Turkey to close a border of the so-called Balkan route to stop this way to Europe. And so the increase, the pouring in was diminished drastically. Last year, I think there were about 1.2 or 1.5 million refugees coming to Germany. This year, I think up to now, it's about 220,000 or 230,000 people migrating to Germany. So it's less than last year, but it's still a big number. And last year we had this famous speak of Angela Merkel, our chancellor, who said, we can make it, refugees welcome, and that created this welcome refugee culture in Germany. And it was in the very same city, Munich, where 1 year ago we had on any given weekend up to 20,000 refugees coming in, and people, ordinary citizens, were cheering them and were offering food and shelter and so on. And in this moment there started the debate. Some people thought we have to take them in, we have to give them shelter, and we can integrate them. And others said there are too many coming in a too short period of time, we can't integrate them. And I think that was a point when Angela Merkel, who was very popular and is still popular today, but for a part of Germany fell out of love with her. And same happened to Europe. Our European countries weren't very amused about this solo action of Angela Merkel, who said, we have to help them, we have this obligation. And then we started these negotiations with Turkey, and I think the atmosphere 1 year ago and today is totally different.
So clearly the hospitality is drying up.
Sure, yeah.
Rebecca, I mean, refugees coming into Europe from Syria or from Iraq, I mean, that's one thing. What about people referred to as returning jihadis. You know, these are Europeans, young people who go to Syria, who go to Iraq, spend some time there with ISIL, and then come back.
Yeah.
How great a danger do they pose? Is it a bigger danger?
Well, not numerically.
Yeah.
Certainly, there's not that many returning jihadis. We don't know precisely how many there are, of course. But in terms of coming back with an ideology intact and a lot of training, and then perhaps serving as a node for facilitation, recruiting others into the network, that's certainly a possibility. Although another thing that we've seen, of course, is young men and women who go to Syria and Iraq and then realize it's not what they had expected it to be and come back gratefully. But I think probably the larger number that we've seen are people who would be classed as returning jihadis.
Yeah, we've heard of a number of cases where young people have gone there basically on an adventure trip, not realizing what they were getting into, and they've come back. Joe, we were talking about the age of the lone attacker or very small groups. How does Europe counter that? And of course, the other problem that mitigates against Europe getting full control of this is the fact that it has open borders, isn't it?
That you can move. You can actually move. Once you set into the most parts of Europe, the Schengen Accord, namely you arrive, like you arrive in Athens, Greece, or Lisbon, Portugal, or Berlin, Germany, or Paris, France, then you can theoretically, at least, because things have changed a little bit over the last period, you can move all over the place, from the southern Mediterranean all the way to the northern pole, within the Schengen zone, with no border control, with no customs, with nobody actually. Now, once again, things have changed over the last year, 18 months in this sense, and you do have controls through a way, and legislative and practical way, which diverts the strict Schengen implications. But I think that politically also these things, behind the police level and the intelligence gathering and intelligence operations and counterterrorism, politically in terms of impact on society, on the way people think and behave and go about their daily lives, this is a very powerful thing. The idea that people may enter from, let them be from Afghanistan or from Syria or from Libya or from elsewhere, and then move, or even people who had been radicalized on European soil, this so-called homegrown terrorism, could move. We saw how effective and how deadly that was in the cases of 2 attacks in Brussels and Paris, in which crossing borders play a major role in the success, so to speak, of the deadly operations. So if you just multiply that north and south, east and west, you can see what kind of deadly impact it might have on heads and thoughts and mentality.
And Rebecca, didn't we have a case in Paris where the identities of these perpetrators of these acts were known in one country but not in the other? And of course that just goes to what Joe was saying, that once they've crossed, they're in another country.
Yes, and it was a cross-border terror attack. I mean, they drove in from Brussels to Paris for the Bataclan attack. Their point of origin was Brussels. That is true. And the internal open borders in the Schengen zone, some complications when you're talking about movement of terrorists, although, again, I feel like just need to be clear that when we're talking about terrorists who've committed these attacks, generally speaking, they are not people who came in as refugees. They're people who were either immigrants from well before the refugee crisis, or people who were born in Europe, raised in Europe, the children of immigrants.
And that makes it even more complicated, since otherwise you could look for people who came within the last 12 or 20 months and make a surveillance whether they have any links to terroristic or Islamic organizations. But you have, on the other side, those people born and raised in European countries, and they radicalize them kind of themselves, and that's totally complicated to get them. And I think in the end it doesn't make a big difference whether they are sent by ISIS or just inspired by ISIS. Like this guy in Nice, he was inspired by ISIS.
That's right.
In Würzburg in Germany last week, who claimed, when he came to Germany, he claimed to be from Afghanistan, but now we think, our law enforcement thinks, he was from Pakistan, and he was older than he claimed to be. He said he's 17, but he was maybe 20 or older. And he radicalized himself, and that's it's totally complicated to get track to those guys.
Rolls, the United States has adopted what are seen as some very controversial policies in terms of how it counters the terrorist threat here. There is surveillance by domestic agencies, by the NSA, etc. Would you see something like that in Germany?
Well, I see at least a discussion coming up, especially in the light of these recent attacks. But you do have to understand that we do have a history of a surveillance state in Eastern Germany, and that's not so long ago. We know where it can go to, and we know where we don't want it to lead. So German populace still is very, well, skeptical and resistant. And if you talk about Edward Snowden, most people in Germany probably think he's a hero.
And Rebecca, when we look at how the law takes care of this in Europe, how successful has Europe been in prosecuting terrorists?
I think generally speaking, fairly successful. But you're talking, I'm assuming, about terrorists who are identified before they commit an attack, because the situation that we're dealing with now with the manhunt is really the exception rather than the rule. Generally speaking, when we see a terror attack, the terrorists are actually usually killed on site, so it's not, there's no opportunity to go through the justice system. I think once they're able to get into the justice system, in places like Germany, the pathways for prosecution are fairly good. When you're looking at Brussels, I think Brussels is a much more complicated situation because of the sort of very separate municipalities. It doesn't hang together, the legal system, quite in the same way that it does in Germany.
Yeah, that's right. They have those communes in Brussels.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Arnold Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.